Hey everyone, welcome back to your favorite sales podcast. I'm your host, Ross Rich, and today we have a very special guest on 10 out of 10 GTM. We're doing things a little different today. Usually we'll have a sales leader with a fancy title, SVP of sales, VP of RevOps, CRO, but today we have one of the most elite sellers I have met in my career. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of folks that maybe have come across Alex Kane, aka AK. So yeah, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule, closing one-of-a-kind deals to join us today.
High praise, Ross. I'm stoked to be here.
Amazing. Well, before we get into it, love for you to share a bit about your background, um, and kind of your focus and might I say obsession with partnering with customers, getting deals done, and I think really leading from the front as someone who's really passionate about selling.
Thank you. I'd like to say that sales is my calling. I fought it for years. My dad told me you should get into sales. I was like, no, Dad, I'm going to go to art school and play water polo. And so I did, a different path to getting here. But once I finally realized what sales was really about, that it wasn't what I had told myself in my head was wear a tie every day to work and, very buttoned up lifestyle. It's so incredible to get to know these customers and be improvisational in these conversations, sell them something that's going to be great for their business and provide a solution and a partnership.
Hmm.
It's been fantastic. And so my career's grown over the last decade of being in sales. And now I am a enterprise select account executive at Samsara. I've been with the company since the very beginning and I've gotten to see them grow, go public, and expand into the enterprise space. And truly believe that what we're doing at Samsara is changing the planet for the better, helping people be a lot safer, helping companies that have large emissions issues be a lot more efficient and a lot more sustainable. And it's something that impacts everyone's day-to-day life. And it's with companies that we largely ignore. People don't know they exist or how big they are or what they do. And getting to see the underneath of society, of the economy, how do we actually make the goods that get to our shelves? How do we produce the food that gets on our plate? How do we provide the energy and the utilities that power everything else we do? And the technology that's being used inside these companies can greatly improve. And that's where the excitement comes from. So happy to be
Amazing.
here, talk about sales, and this is my favorite subject.
Awesome, man. Well, I think we're gonna do things again a bit different today. We talk a lot about, actionable tips and tactics and strategies here often, but I think today we're gonna take a bit of a different approach and kick off with mindset. You kind of touched on it already, because I think a lot of people think about sales, and even sellers starting out, and I kind of thought about this even in just in general, the professional world of that buttoned up person. Like when you go from being a child and adolescent, high school, university, always think about, oh, there's this business world and these adults and they show up this way. And it kind of feels like very inorganic and unhuman and not natural. And like, how am I going to act like that? And, just very personally, I feel like I did a disservice to myself trying to show up that way in my first few years in the professional world. And it wasn't until, I kind of fell into sales and started realizing it was that human dimension and that organicness that kind of separates the best whatever, whether you're a seller, executive in any industry, the people that show up authentically are usually the folks that rise to the top. So I'm curious to get your perspective on that, and kind of your learning throughout your journey of maturing as a seller.
One of the things that I tell a lot of other sales reps is that if you talk to them like they're your boss, they will become your boss. And if you talk to them like they're your friend, they will become your friend. And there is a psychology to it all of how to get people to let their guard down, treat you as a peer, let you into their inner circle. And people's inner circles are not for the corporate world, it's for the people that they want to hang out with outside of work. And their inner circle is made up of people that they trust. And you have to be able to be authentic to get in further. If all you do is provide a solution, if all you are is a yes person who's going to, focus on the value you're adding to their organization and not actually get to know their organization, they
Hmm.
can't let you in much further than the front door. You can do your presentation, you can show your ROI, and then you can go. But the person who actually is curious to be in the inner circle, who wants to know what they're doing, who does their research, who speaks to them from a point of just true authenticity. You're bringing some industry knowledge to the table. You don't need to be the expert. They're the expert of what they do, but your genuine desire to understand it better and provide them something of value is heard. They get it. And the way you speak to them matters. The words you use, the focus you have on it being about them, not about you,
Mhm.
that's what really gets you a bit further. And from a mindset standpoint, sales is really hard. And anyone who tells you that it's an easy job is doing you a disservice. And you have to go into this career as if it's a contact sport. You would never play football without pads. You would never want to do something where you're putting yourself at risk. And so you have to come into it with a level of positivity and protection of yourself. So you're confident that you've prepared to achieve your goals, to exceed on the field. And then you also need to understand that things don't always go your way and you can't get down. You
Mhm.
can't let this one deal crush you to the point where you can't get back up and do it again. You can't let this one cold call destroy your positivity and your confidence. You've got to stay at a point where you're taking hits all the time. That's what the armor and the protection is for. And your mental placebo effect of sorts is that you're always one turn away from the next great thing. Then tomorrow
Yes.
is going to be better than it is today. And you got to keep telling yourself that because you're manifesting it to come true by staying that positive. And a lot of people say luck is readiness meeting opportunity. And you have to put yourself in a position to be lucky. You can't just wait for it and not do the
Yeah.
preparation for the moment.
And that's not just like, I think you're hitting on something that's really important where, again, you're talking to this disservice. I think we've talked about sales in terms of that preparedness from a information perspective because that's the easy stuff. The account information, reading the, 10Ks and 10Qs, like all of these best practices and acronyms, all these things are important, but what's behind it, what powers all of those things is how you approach the conversation, yourself being human, how you're thinking about things, not just saying like, how do I get this information from them? But it needs to be very deep inside you. And I think that's kind of what I'm really excited to dig out of you, Kane, is how do we help other people understand both from a rep level, how they can do that, but also leaders. How can you be better arming your team, not just again from those tactics perspective, but help them take that winning approach and mindset, because that is 100 times more valuable building that culture than it is, any spreadsheet or doc or kind of talk track that you can arm them with, right?
Exactly. The enthusiasm, the excitement. That's what you want your team to be just frothing with. You got to gear them with product knowledge so that they're confident in what they're talking about. Yes, there are tons of sales trainings out there and we've tried them all. And in the end, some people grasp somewhat some versions of it. Others are better for others. It's not one size fits all. But what we can provide that is one size fits all is improving people's confidence, helping them be motivated for the day and the month and the quarter to come, and helping them also be enthusiastic about the way that they talk about their product. Because if you're not excited about what you're talking about, then why on earth should I be?
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's dig into maybe, going back early in your career, both for yourself as well as peers around you. What are, maybe two or three aha moments that you've had or seen that, if maybe a CRO out there is listening or a rep that wants to take themselves to the next level, what are some ways to think about how to drive that right winning mindset?
This is a great one. So where it really comes down to for me is I have a unique background. I'm an art major. I am not your traditional person in sales. And I could have said, look, that career's over, sales career is starting, and there's nothing I can bring from my old career to my new career. I'm going to start from scratch.
Mm,
But instead, I realized I have a skill set that no one else in my space has. Very few people have the public speaking skills, the presentation skills, the marketing, the email, the slide deck capabilities. I am a powerhouse at these things.
mhm.
And I could say, oh, well, that's not my job anymore. I'm not in design. I'm not on marketing. I need to focus on sales. And I had a coach in water polo who tried to help me understand that there's a difference between a good player and a great player. And this works for every sport, whether it's basketball, whether it's baseball, water polo, whatever it might be. And he said, good players focus on what they're not good at. They become well
Mm,
rounded, they become good at everything, but that stops their ceiling at good. A great player focuses only on what they are great at and they ignore the things that they are not good at. They double down on their greatness. And you can take Steph Curry, for example. He is not trying to dunk the ball and post people up. He is shooting 3 pointers in a way no one's ever seen anyone shoot 3 pointers. And he has become one of the greatest players of all time, possibly the greatest player of all time, by doing what he's great at and not hyper focusing on what he's not great at. And I take that very seriously in my sales career. And what I would behoove other leaders in sales to do is to help identify what your team's members are great at
mm.
and help them double down on that greatness and not constantly push everyone towards their weaknesses.
That's a really good point. And again, I think we're talking a lot about, common things that point people in the wrong directions. I do think it's important to be aware of the things that you're not necessarily good at and the things that could be stopping deals from closing because it's binary. But you're right. Like you only need to be great or excellent at one or two things to stand out. Right. And in this market, we definitely need to figure out ways to stand out because people are just bombarded by potential sellers and conversations. That's a really good point, building that confidence through what you're great at. I think you also hit on something that I'm not sure if you're even aware of is what you talked about taking something from your past and applying that to what you're doing. I think that's a very unique trait of great leaders and sellers is this idea of horizontal thinkers. You can take and apply things that you're learning across previous deals, stake won and lost things to use on the next thing? And how do you think about that more broadly of like, I can take things from my personal life, from my professional life, from my sports life, and apply that to my job. And I think that's something very unique of some of the elite salespeople and leaders that I've met. Don't think about life very compartmentalized. And I think that's part of maybe the authenticity that they're able to bring to sales conversations.
Big time. And take these great leaders, these CEOs, these killer companies. They are the first ones to tell you that they supplement areas of things that are not their expertise with other people who that is their expertise. And the same goes in an entrepreneurial mindset of a salesperson. When there is something that is not my expertise, I'm going to bring in someone who is great at that to supplement the thing that I might not be the best at. And I want to learn a little bit about it. I want to be educated and know how to do it,
Yeah.
but it's the same thing that the best CEOs do. They're not trying to be the marketing officer. They're not trying to be the CFO. They bring someone in to do those pieces so they can focus on what they're great at.
100%. Yeah, they put the pieces together, right? That's a great analogy. Being an entrepreneur is how do I supplement myself on maybe the technical side or on the hardware piece, on the software piece? How do you kind of put those pieces together and build those relationships um, with the folks internally or externally?
Maybe that's why sales is so hard, Ross. We think we have to be everything, and no one can be everything. It's hard.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So yeah, in terms of mindset, we talked a bit about culture fueling those tactics and strategies. Is you can have the right, playbook and process, but if you don't have the right kind of positive culture and conviction, horizontal thinking, double down on what great is. Any other aha moments that you've seen from either coaching yourself or other sellers that really help double down on that right mindset and approach to sales?
So I think a lot of people get into sales because the career has a great potential to earn a lot of money, and people want that for their lifestyles, their hopes, their dreams, and it draws people to the career. And we all get into it with this dream of having life-changing opportunity. And not everyone experiences that. Some people are in sales for a long period of time and they're making their OTE, and their OTE is a significant amount of money, but it's not life-changing per se.
Mhm.
And so they're searching for this next level. And in my career, I'm very drawn to people leadership. I absolutely love it. But what I've learned is that there's a big difference between leadership and management. They're not the same thing. And I wish they had more in common at a widespread level. And so I was always one foot in that world and one foot in the other world. And I never gave myself the opportunity to be all in on either. I was constantly an individual contributor who dabbled in management and team lead and being the person who's leading trainings, helping new hires, just doing all the things that leadership should be, but doing it in the lens of an individual contributor who's the tip of the spear, who's right there on the battlefield with everyone else, showing them the example of greatness.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I finally said, Alex, you got to pick a lane. Which one of these things are you? You're either following this management career or you're following this individual contributor career to the highest levels. And
Hmm.
I let go of the management dream and I went all in on being the best salesperson I can be. And I saw my earnings triple, quadruple. Everything changed for me the moment that I put both feet in the same pool and stop being 1 foot in this world and 1 foot in this world. So my advice is if you want to see the ultimate success in your career, you have to put everything you have into the thing that you are and not constantly be 1 foot in what you're not.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think oftentimes the best managers aren't the best sellers. And sometimes the best sellers get pushed down this path of, like you're saying, like the best managers don't, the best leaders need to be leading from the front on the field. The best managers don't. They maybe are
Correct.
unblocking other things internally. There's a lot of, especially at bigger companies, there's a lot of, BS you need to navigate internally, and they should be unblocking the folks on the field to get their job done with the customers. And unfortunately, I feel like there's this um, cachet, social capital, whatever you want to call it, with that management path over being elite at doing at your craft. And I feel like this is kind of a modern day thing because when I look back or, read history books, whatever, like the people that were great craftspeople were so highly respected. But that doesn't really seem like the case in modern day business. I'm curious if that kind of rings true to you as someone who kind of went down the craftsperson path and how you think about, that point of view in our world.
Absolutely. I think that it comes up a good bit, mostly because everyone always asks you, what's the next thing for you? Everyone wants to know what's your 3 to 5 year plan? Where's this all leading?
Yeah.
And they don't understand that I'm where everyone wants to be. We all got into this career to have the opportunity to be a number one sales rep at a rocket ship company and make life changing money. And if that's the pinnacle of this career and you are there, then there is no better job. And so I'm not necessarily trying to think about what do I need to change? Where do I need to go? It's more of a drive to maintain the ability to do this every single year over and over again and never drop off from this pinnacle of success that I have achieved and do it better. And I tell people a lot of times the later you get in your career, you're not switching from one job to another. You're going from a good job to a better job, a great job to an even greater job. And it's about climbing that ladder and goal. And it's never one place that is always forever. You have to constantly realize that the world of technology, the world of business, it is ever changing, ever moving. And there are times where sales teams are greatly needed. And then when a company reaches a point, the sales team's not as greatly needed. And the best sellers do find themselves moving from battle to battle where the best sellers are needed.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And again, I wish there was more celebration for the craft because at the end of the day, what matters, what do the public markets care most about? What do investors, what do private, anyone, CEOs, boards? The number one thing is growth with high valued, high usaged accounts. And that's what the best sellers on the front lines have an exponential impact on. When you look at, even Benioff said what less than 20% of their sellers are contributing over 80% of the revenue. That's at a late stage company worth over $250 billion. What does that mean to a company that is at 250K or 2.5K or, 250 million of ARR? Like that is the most important thing. And unfortunately, I didn't feel like that every day when I was selling. And I just don't feel like that's the kind of market understanding, despite it just being like the hard facts and numbers.
Yeah, it's almost like a job people expect you to want to be done with at some point.
Yeah.
And there's got to be a way to make it sustainable. How do you have this long, successful career if it's not sustainable? So you have to protect yourself a little bit. And that's where that armor comes back in. being able to get up every day and do this hard job isn't because you have an unlimited amount of energy or you're a glutton for punishment. It's that you're setting yourself up to focus on the things that make you happy. And I think work-life balance is something that gets a misnomer in the industry, and people think that it means that there's this part of the day where you don't work and there's just part of the day where you do. And what I've seen from other great leaders and successful people is that they find a way to marry the two. And life lives through the joy of work, and work leads you to opportunities to live as well. An opportunity to go with your company on a trip to a foreign country and see somewhere else in the world. That is living, it's not work. And there's a way to enjoy every moment of it, whether it's the dinner out with the customer and how good this steak is and the conversation was magical, or whether it's the joy of winning a project and having a successful outcome of the implementation. We have to find ways to let life infuse work and work infuse life, and then it no longer feels like work because it's just all so joyful.
Yeah, that's another great, I think, misnomer that points people in the wrong direction because you almost start telling yourself that I need to escape, that this thing is bad and this other thing is good. Um, when there's some days at work that are, more fun than normal life. Normal life, I mean, it is life. So that's another really good point to maybe wrap up the mindset side of things. Well, maybe shifting gears because I know you're one of your things that you're great at and passionate about is storytelling, and would love to hear your perspective on how you hone the craft. Because I think with anything that people do great, yes, there's kind of that intuition internally, but I think most things can be learned if you're passionate about it, if there's that, interest and excitement. And I think storytelling is something that a lot of people are very interested in, but don't necessarily know how to crack because it can look so good from people that are excellent at it and almost feel unattainable, unachievable to be great at this craft that's so important to almost every part of life. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on storytelling in your journey.
Absolutely. This is my favorite part. I always say if I would write a book, it'd be called Story Selling. And that I'm not selling anyone, I'm just telling stories about what we do, how it works for others. And those stories in turn are making people want to buy this product, selling them. And so the story is a much more relatable way to help people ground it in reality. I refer to it as grounding it in reality because I can say my product is going to save you X, Y, and Z, and it's going to do all these incredible things. The ROI is going to be massive. And I just sound like a politician. But when I tell a story about someone who you feel you can relate to, who's in a similar job at a similar type company, who had similar type issues, and what we've been able to achieve with them, and how it's changed their company, changed his role, changed his work life balance. He's happier. He has more time. He used to be spending all his time doing A, B, and C. Do you spend a lot of time doing A, B, and C? It puts it into their world. Now, all of a sudden, I'm not talking about time saving and how much money you save if you save time. I'm helping him tangibly see and build a futuristic vision of, I think there's a better version of my life that this product can help me achieve and get to. This
Mhm.
story sounds so much like me. I'm the person in this story. And I've creatively always thought about this in two ways. One is the confidence of the delivery of the message. Your public speaking skills is very important.
Mhm.
So there are ways to improve public speaking skills. There's Toastmasters. There's just generally getting up in front of people and talking, not being afraid of the microphone and the spotlight. And you could do this over the course of your entire life. And it starts
Mhm.
at a young age of being class president and giving a speech for people to vote for you, all the way through to the half team time motivational speech to your sports team that you played in high school, or all the way up to just being the one who's a leader in your organization who's okay delivering the message. And luckily in sales, we get to do a lot of public speaking on Zoom, in meetings, at conferences. Embrace it. It's something that gets easier the more you do it. So
Yeah.
it's a practice that gets better. But then the next piece is the content. And this is the hardest part because it's very easy for someone to drone on about some story that doesn't make any sense. And we're all sitting there waiting for this story to end, and it may be delivered perfectly. He's a great speaker. She's a great speaker. But what on earth are we talking about this for? Like, we're talking about whether or not there's Martians on Mars and somehow looping it back to SAS. Like, I don't know where we're at here. Like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So the content matters. And I do a religious process every company I get to. I don't know the stories yet. I haven't met the customer, and I don't want to make these stories up. I want these stories to be legitimate.
Hmm.
And I would love it if it was my story, all my personal experiences, my customers, but I'm new. I don't have these stories yet. So I print out all of the customer stories that this company has. So, for instance, Samsara. And I then read each one of them. And while I read them, I highlight the most important parts of it. After I've gone through every single customer story, I go back through and I only read the parts I highlighted. And this time I underline the impact statements in the highlighted section. And then I go back through the whole stack one more time and I reread all the things I underlined. And what I'm doing is I'm building a Rolodex in my brain of stories that, even though they are not my stories, they are stories I can now regurgitate and tell.
Yeah.
And I am a master of picking and choosing the parts that matter. And it doesn't need to be one story, it can be many stories combined to deliver a message. You can manipulate the industry involved in said story so that the industry aligns with what they want it to be.
Hmm.
And you're building stories as you go. So I think the misnomer on storytelling in the industry is that these need to be case studies. And it's not about telling a case study. They can literally get that off of a one pager. A
Hmm.
story is about grounding it in reality, letting them know that you truly understand what goes on in their world and that you help other people with the same exact thing. And doing it in a way where it's not about the statistics, it's about the emotional experience of meeting them where they're at, which is you work so hard doing these things and the outcomes look like this. And here's our experience with someone just like you trying to do the same thing. And what is that outcome? Because if I can paint a visual of where we're going, that is why we're going to go there. But if you can't see the future of what's to come, then why on earth do you want to spend money on something you can't be certain is going to end up the way that you would hope?
Totally. And I think what I'm hearing is the power of storytelling is about what the late great Skip Miller called time traveling. And this is something that he's like executives speak in the past and the future. Below the line people that don't make decisions, that don't have that kind of internal or external social cachet, talk about the now and the features and the products, and leaders and people that you want to work with speak about the past and the present. And it sounds like this is a tool to very simply talk about where you can take the company without just using the, bore you to sleep ROI, X numbers, things that don't feel like they're real and it was written by folks that have no idea what it's like to do the job.
Exactly. And they're not experts on our product. They will remember this story far more than they will remember any stat or feature that I highlight.
Yeah. And let's maybe double click into that because I think something that I'm constantly learning about sales, I'm similarly very passionate about, how do I get better at this craft, kind of why, started to code in the first place. Talk to me about the power of simplicity and why you think most people overcomplicate things. And that's at the core of, I think, why most sellers sometimes miss the target with their customers they're talking about. And how do you think about simplicity and boiling it down to just what matters and what's going to resonate?
It's so funny because most of the products that are out there that are sold at a high level, their purpose is to provide simplicity to something that is currently complex. And we fail to weave that simplicity into ourselves and the way we go about our own sales experience. How we price needs to be simple. How we communicate via email needs to be simplified. Everything can benefit from just getting leaner and getting more concise and being to the point, simple. And so taking something that feels complex and boiling it down to this is what it's all about, that's the outcome that a lot of bigger leaders, the C level, they
Hmm.
just want to get the cliff notes, and cliff notes are simplified. And so I think that my mindset on where simple comes from is that if you ask me a question of, hey, tell me about your installation process, something simple like that, I could say, oh, cool, here's knowledge base articles. Here's a video that's 5 minutes long of how to do the install. I can provide you the entire technical specs of everything associated with this install. And that feels like a really high quality answer, but it's not simple. I
It's
could, in one,
overwhelming.
Oh, so totally. And it's everything you technically need if you want to dive into the rabbit hole that far. And so I come in and I say, every single employee at Samsara gets given the same technology I'm sending you. And most of them are college grads who are in their early 20s and probably have never touched a vehicle outside of driving it in their entire life. And every single one of them who are not technicians like you, who are not good with vehicles like you, is able to install it. It's that simple. And I don't need
Boom.
to even now send you any of the videos or the documentations because I made you confident that it's so simple, anyone can do it. And now we've moved on to the next subject very quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point. And great example, both to pricing that in the process. And this is something that, I've been obsessing over, obviously, with the court is how do you both provide the right level of detail? Because there's certain people in certain parts where it is about the details, and there's certain parts where it's about the conviction and confidence that you're translating. How do you balance that? So let's say you're on a call and there's two people. This is the hardest thing is you have multiple stakeholders that care about different things on a call. So let's get specific here for a second. So let's say you're on with, the VP level person who just wants to make sure that their team's going to handle it. And let's say they also have someone two, three levels down that's going to be responsible for making sure that they're going to do this transition from either status quo or a competitor. How do you think about balancing that fine line?
Absolutely. It's definitely tough. And I think that where there's two people in the room, let's just imagine, a lot of times we'll even bring an imaginary third person in the room. And the imaginary third person is a tool that I use to help them realize that there is an alternate version of someone who doesn't get it, and it's not them. And so I prop them up by making my lower level champion look great to his boss, and I make the boss look great compared to this imaginary other scenario. So there's another version of people who are going through the same exact evaluation and they're doing it the wrong way. And how it's so great to talk to people who are doing it the right way. And you have to reinforce that they are doing it well, better than others, and that you have this scope of view outside of this room that is able to understand many other evaluations, many other customers' needs. And the people in this room, they get it. And if you can convince them that they get it and that you're someone who supports their excellence, that's what they really need to know. So it's not so
Mm.
much, why am I better than everyone else? It's why you guys are better than everyone else and how great it is to work with people like you, and that the sky is the limit when you combine a really good product with a really good team like you have. And so that additional person who is helping me show them where they're doing things really well and also where this other person maybe didn't do
Like
things
a
well.
like a comparison you're talking about, or something
Yeah,
relative to the conversation that you're having.
exactly. Like they're doing the exact same thing as everyone else. What is everyone else doing? This they usually want to know. And so I
Mm.
allow that person to have a seat at the table. And when we get into negotiation points, what I help them understand is that we're also having to take into scope all of the many other customers who already use Samsara, and we have a responsibility to be fair to them as well. And there are rules to the way pricing works, and I don't control the rules. And so I walk them through certain things that are to their benefit that I'm trying to now move myself to their side of the table and negotiate with them against Samsara and show them where there are ways they can win. I mean, doesn't it make sense to you, Ross, that somebody who signs a 5-year agreement gets a better price than someone who signs a 3-year? I mean, that makes sense. And now we're all on board that that makes sense.
Yeah,
And don't you agree that somebody who pays for the license annually instead of monthly deserves a better price than the person who's paying monthly? I mean, that just makes sense. And you get everyone to agree that these things make sense and that we should be doing it this way to get the best possible price because that makes sense.
totally. No, I think that's a good way of thinking about it and not backing yourself into the corner. And again, that kind of going back to even mindset, how do you think about yourself as not just this, again, I think it's unfortunate, this like, below the line AE at this company. And you're like, no, I'm an expert. I've worked with all these companies. I've done the research. I'm going to help you solve this problem. Like you said, better relatively than any of your peers because we're working together and we believe in the software and we believe in, whatever the project we're working on. So, um, I love that. Um,
I
any
think that's where the
other,
stories help though, Ross.
yeah,
I think that when you're telling stories, it validates that you have something to add to this project. And so it props you up too as an industry expert, a thought leader, because you're providing things that can't just be put on a one pager. You're better than the website. And you're telling stories of experience helping others doing the things that they want. And so it's you become this X factor to the deal. And a lot of times people buy from people, and products are similar enough that it blurs in their eyes. And that's how you get into price wars. But man, when there is someone in the deal who they feel more comfortable with, that they will be there to help support them in this project and this business, and that they're providing something to this deal that is an X factor, it's hard to pinpoint whether or not you are the reason that they bought your product or not. But man, is it a extra little weight that pushes things in your direction.
Yeah, I totally agree. People don't want to take the risk. That's why most people stay with the status quo. Speaking of, the Challenger sale earlier and Jolt and all these things, it's the fear. So, kind of two final questions here to make sure we hit on these. I know we only got like 8 minutes left, but two thoughts. One we'll hit at the end, which is what stops most reps from doing the things that just sound obvious that we're talking about, that are in all the books, that are in all these best practices. But before we get there, one thing that I've heard from you, and I consistently hear from the top most elite sellers, is painting this picture of a successful future and actually a lot of optimism and positivity. But I would argue that most of the best practices that I see talked about these days is grounding people in pain and fear and uncertainty, because people don't solve for better, they solve to fix existing challenges, and using language that just feels very inorganic, at least to myself sometimes. So I'm curious to get your perspective on balancing the human psychology of pain aversion versus, going to the better future, but that it seems like the most inspiring leaders and bestsellers are probably more positive and optimistic in their conversations with customers than the opposite. So does that make sense?
I love that you brought this up. Honestly, I talk about this a good bit. And I do think that the majority of the sales industry is being pushed towards a doctor prescription style of sales. Find their pain, provide them a solution for their pain, and they live in this world of the pain. And that's where ROI definitely can be found and extracted. That's great. But when the customer walks away, they go, man, what a downer of a conversation. Like, I just feel terrible every time I talk to this company. Like, it just doesn't make me feel good. And I'm sure
Yeah.
that like what I'm doing is wrong. But we also have to remember these companies, for the most part, they've been in business for a long time. They're doing just fine. Like, yeah, there is something that is painful that could be better, but they're in business
Is
and
it really
they're
going to fall
publicly
apart
traded.
because you don't do
Yeah.
this thing a week later? Probably not.
And I'm coming in and nagging them. I'm like, hey, you're terrible for this and you're bad at this. And this is all the things that you're not doing right.
Yeah.
And it's just this negativity. And they remember the project as they're the people who bring negativity into the room. And it's never fun meeting with them. And it holds back the relationship. Even if everything you said was right and the ROI is spot on, doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It's a
Yeah.
negative conversation.
Yeah.
Then there's the alternate. If you can make everything about, hey, that's a bummer that it goes that way, but wouldn't it be so cool if it was like this? And we start building this version of utopia. And now you're sitting in your position as the decision maker and you're deciding between, I got all this pain over here and I've got this version of utopia over here. And yes, I understand that all of these products want to come in and solve for this pain, but one product, one company helped me build a version of utopia that I think just sounds amazing. It sounds fantastic. Like, I go to sleep at night thinking about what if my life was in utopia and not where it is now. And that is the emotional draw that
Yeah.
makes them say, the budget wasn't there, but the budget's there now. We wanted it to be cheaper than what we pay today or the same price, but now we're willing to pay a little bit more, because it's no different than when we're deciding where we want to go on vacation. I don't take a lot of vacation. So why am I going to cut a corner and stay at a dumpy motel when I don't do this often? Let's just go big and do it right. Like, I have this vision in my head of what I want this to be. And if
Hmm.
someone sells me the all inclusive Mexico vacation that looks like it's just the most magical experience of my life, I no longer care as much about how much more it is than the other vacation, because I want something that's going to give me this outcome. So I focus on the future. I focus on how great it could be, and it makes people want to draw themselves towards it,
Yeah.
as opposed to this reluctant knee surgery that I know I should have, but my goodness, I don't want to go under the knife and be, laid up for 6 months. That doesn't sound like fun. Just take me straight to the point where I'm playing basketball again.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, and it's one of those things where I was curious to hear your perspective on this because it feels very inorganic, those conversations, to me at least. Um, and I feel like you're pointing reps in the wrong direction. And to have these weird conversations where, again, it kind of feels like you're negging them,
Yeah,
instead of, yes, hey, this I'm understanding. I want to talk about now because I want to understand where you are to be able to figure out how to get to the future. And it's not just about being at the future, then what are the stages and how do you de-risk that? And that's that was my understanding of like the human psychology behind Jolt and the Challenger, not necessarily, I think, this obsession with uh quantifying the terrible world that we're living in today and why you need to go with us now.
exactly. And man, it makes the seller's experience a lot better as well, because now
Yeah.
you're living in this positive world where you bring something to the table that is worth smiling about.
Yeah, totally. And so the last piece I wanted to hit on was maybe your musings or top couple thoughts on why the vast, vast, vast majority of sellers and sales leaders struggle to do, again, all the things that we're talking about now. I don't think anyone would disagree. I don't think anything we've said is mind blowing or not commonly known and discussed. But why is it so hard to get there? Why is it so hard to have, you know, 8 out of 10 of your reps doing this instead of typically 2 out of 10?
It's a great question. And I would say that what it really boils down to is that we all say we want to be the best sales rep. We all want to go to President's Club. We all want to make the big W-2. But there is a difference between the people who are achieving it and the ones who aren't in many cases. And what it boils down to for me is that hustle is this idea of doing what no one else is willing to do and going in directions that no one else is asking you to go into, reading into learn the product at a deeper level, read all the customer case studies, be on the road more than everyone else. These are all really hard things to do. And if it was easy, then technically everyone would be a hustler. But this 10% of people who hustle harder than everyone else, those are the ones that actually are seeing the outcomes, the success, the gains per se. And so we're pushing people in this world of, hey, you need to build pipeline, you need to drive deals forward, you need to have X, Y, and Z. And, that's what leads to success. We think it's a mathematical equation that if you do these things,
Mhm.
poof, it equals success. And the reality is, all of the real success is coming from by doing all the things that aren't on the menu, the secret menu of other
Mm.
things and other activities that we can't logically put on the to-do list because it doesn't necessarily directly equal revenue. Does reading every single customer case study 3 times directly equal revenue? No, it's a lot of time and effort that might not pay off. Does power using your product and pretending you're a user for months at a time and spending your nights and weekends playing with the technology directly drive pipeline or revenue? No, it technically doesn't. But these are the actions and the activities that make the greatest sales reps, the greatest members of the team, because they've taken the time to do what no one else is willing to do. And if you told everyone, said, hey, it's now required, you have to do all these things, you'd have a hard time finding people who want to work for you because they're looking for less work, not more work. And that entrepreneurial mindset, that probably is the piece that we need to double down on and push people to be. And instead of trying to push them to being good employees who show up at a certain time and stay to a certain time or hit quota or build certain pipeline, I want you to be so built in and bought in on the idea that you're an entrepreneur. This product is your product. This company is your company. Go out and evangelize it, and the world is your oyster. And that's what we really need to be pushing people on the mindset of. And they will pick up all the pieces that we're teaching them along the way because they bought in on the outcome of where it goes. And that's no different than what we're talking about with the customer and getting them to not buy in on the pain, but to buy in on the outcome, the utopia. So we need to double down on the sales team and let them know that there is a utopia in the cards for them.
Yeah.
And what it takes to get to utopia, it's not going to be easy. You're going to want to do all these things. And there is no magic cadence, email, cold call script, or flow to a trial that is going to be a guarantee that it works every single time. Because if it was, why would you even need us?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And again, kind of going back to what I think you shared at the start is you can have the right product and trial roadmap and SEs and all the right stuff. But if you don't have the fuel to that, if you don't have the right approach and mindset and that, hey, we're going to give you 50, 60, 70% of the way there, the rest is on you. There's only so much to point you in this right direction. When you get on a phone with someone and you sense their energy and ask them about certain things, there's no way we're going to be able to build a super specific playbook around that, and that mindset and approach to solving customer problems, the details of it, or why someone would spend time with you over a competitor or just continue doing their same thing. That's the differentiator. I agree. But yeah, super super hard to build a team of that's even open to hearing that. I think that's what I hear when I'm hearing you talk is like, if you shared that with people, how many people would really get it, and are people even in a position to learn that lesson?
A lot of times people ask, what do I need to do what you've done here?
Yeah.
Like they come in and they say, show me how to do it. And a lot of times I give them a backwards answer. There's no direct playbook, like you said. And I say, well, step one is you're going to have to work harder than me. And that's going to be really, really hard to do. So it's challenging them to be willing to put in the extra effort, the hustle, the drive. And I warn them, I say, the moment you ever start putting in more effort than me is the moment I now go and try and tit for tat with you and take my game to the next level. So it's going to be a battle. So, like, that's kind of the core. And I think a lot of people are afraid to tell sales teams you need to be working harder, you need to be grinding harder because it's a negative connotation, and that's why it needs to be about what are you going to get if you do, because it's not worth it if you're not going to get something. So let's talk about building that mindset of where it all takes you, so that the sales team really believes the effort's worth the reward.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Well, this was super fun to dive in. I feel like I got a little snapshot into what's made you so great and inspire others. And the challenge is in the simplicity, right? It's simple stuff, but how many people want to do it? How many people get fired up about it that are truly passionate about it and willing to put in that work? Um, but unfortunately, again, I think that there's a lot of bad advice out there that I've definitely heard that's definitely pointed me in the wrong direction. So hopefully for folks out there listening, I've heard from someone who's gone through it. And again, it probably sounds very different than what you were imagining, from someone taking this approach from, someone with a passion for their background in arts and connecting with people, and all those things in a relatively technical product sale. So this was awesome, man.
Well, thanks so much for having me on the podcast, Ross. This was great. I really am excited to hear what the listeners say, and happy to answer any follow up questions for anyone out there who wants to connect.
Yeah, definitely hit up if Kane if you have questions. He's on LinkedIn. So yeah, thanks again for the time.
Thanks, Ross.